Testing, testing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 2. Testing, testing.
Hello, this is our first CSC stream, joined by a group of other people that have made lots of mistakes in their lives, just like me. And this evening, we're going to try something a little bit new. We're going to try something that we've never done before, and that's confess. So the purpose of tonight, it's going to probably be a relatively short CSC event. We're going to, first of all, just do a little opening, make sure everyone can hear us, check our stream's working, as we're using completely new technology and new setups, etc. And a massive thank you to Gary for prepping all of this and getting it all set up. Yeah, just a small amount of sweat on his brow. So my name's Harry McLaren. I'm one of the moderators of Cyber Scotland Connect, and between Gary and I, we're essentially co-hosting this evening. We're joined by a number of cybersecurity and information security professionals, both on the stream and as speakers, who have come ready to share a little bit of their own dirty laundry, a little bit of their mistakes or mistakes they've witnessed and the lessons they learned from them in some cases. And then at the end of the stream, I'm going to read out a selection of the confessions that have been submitted in written form. So do stay tuned for that. And I'm now going to hand over to our first confessor, Javad. Welcome, and over to you.
Thank you so much for having me. And, I thought I was being invited to Security Scotland. There'll be Scottish accents on here, and I haven't heard a single one yet. So that's good for me, because otherwise I'd be requesting subtitles. But okay, enough of that. Yeah, mistake number one, insult the hosts who've invited you on.
I'm English. Yeah, I don't mind at all.
Well, okay, the region of the hosts. But so yeah, I'm Javad Malik. I've been working in information security for about 20 years now, 21 nearly. So it's the only career I've ever worked in. So straight out of university, I got a job. Well, I'd done a placement in an IT security team for a bank. So I got first job in there, and I stuck with it ever since. I started off as an IT security administrator, and I was the resident team expert on Windows NT4. So any incidents relating to NT4, they would come to me. And so I'd done like a few of those Microsoft certified, like I didn't go the full MCSE or anything, but I'd done a few of those introduction to administering NT4 and server security and that kind of stuff. So I was getting, like, when you're young and you're full of yourself and you resolve a few things, you think, yeah, I got this. So I was never much of a programmer, but I picked up a bit of scripting along the way, as one does. And there was something on NT called Cackles scripts. We called them Cackles. They were CACLS. So I don't know what the C stood for, but it was access control list. So you just typed in these commands, and you could run it, and it would just bulk change a bunch of access control lists on NT directory servers, which was a lot easier than going into File Manager and clicking on those. It was a horrible, clunky interface, File Manager. This was before the Explorer came out. So I was in the team that done security operations. So we get requests to support projects as well as support live and do incidents. And then we rotated in and out of monitoring as well. So I was there. I was taking requests that were coming in for like projects that had just gone live. There was this weird handover period where there was still project manager involved, although it was a live system. And there was a live system that handled a precursor to online banking. So it's only rolled out to a few high net worth customers who you could log on. They could check their balances, and they could transfer foreign currencies between some accounts. But these were like millionaires who had it. So only a few, but some of them. And on the back end was NT4, and I got a request to change some permissions on some directories. And there was a whole bunch of them. And so, being the clever NT4 expert I thought, hey, why do I need to waste 2 hours of my time going through manually changing these when I can just write a Cackle script that will do it all for me? And so I wrote it all out. And as anyone that has done anything related to computers, you're always going to miss a pipe or a backslash somewhere. And I might have done that, which overwrote the parent directory permissions to all the subdirectory permissions. I didn't realize it at the
Ouch.
time because, why check? And of course, yes, I was running the command straight in production. Give it about 3.5 to 4 minutes later, and my team leader, he sat like two desks down. He turned around to me and goes, "Oh, Jav, mate." I go, "Yeah." He goes, "There's a P1 incident on our queue saying that there's several customers have reported they've lost access to their online banking. And I've taken a look at it, and it's some NT4 system. So do you mind taking a look?" And as you can imagine, first job, that sinking feeling in your gut, that cold sweat breaking down the back of your neck. I'm like, I've really screwed it. I said, "Don't worry, mate. Give it to me. I'll have a look at it because it's NT and I know everything. Don't worry about it. Just assign the ticket for me. I didn't want anyone else looking at it." So I'm sat there and I'm thinking, what do I do? What do I do? I'm looking at it and I'm like, I've got to dig up the documentation and find what the original permissions should have been and revert back to that and what have you. And in the meantime, my team leader turns around to me and goes, "Oh, they're convening an emergency incident meeting. Do you want to go represent the team in there?" Of course I do. So I'm there looking. I'm there sort of like half standing at my desk, ready to go, looking at the documentation, and I don't have time to do it. So I did the only thing that I could do. I thought the truth can set you free, but it's really, really painful. It's probably going to set me free of my job as well. So on the NT4 server that it resided, I'd done what anyone would have done in my shoes. At least that's what I tell myself. I went onto the logs and I hit clear logs. And because this was pre-SIM or anything like that, they weren't centrally backed up anywhere. It was only anyway. So I went to the meeting, and there's a whole bunch of people there, and the project manager arrives after me as well, and everyone's flustered. And what's going on? What's going on? I said, I don't know. And everyone's like, we don't know. And I said, well, I took a quick peek at it when the incident came. I didn't have a lot of time to investigate it, but there was some permissions that seemed amiss. And then the project manager said, yes, I saw that too, but it seems like logging's not turned on because I went to check the logs and there was nothing there. And I was like, what kind of idiot configured this system? And it was like, we don't know, but you seem to have a clue as to what you're doing. I said, all right, then give me 20, 30 minutes. Let me go and see what I can do. Let me look at the documentation and let's see if we can fix these pieces. Clearly it's a permission issue or something like that. So they said, okay, let's reconvene in an hour and let's see what happens. So I go out and clearly I know exactly what to do because I've got the documentation already up on my screen. I go there, I start manually changing all the permissions, painstakingly checking each and every one. And, it took me a good half hour just to manually go through each one of them. Double checked it. 45 minutes later, we're back in the room and they're saying, yeah, all systems are running. Everything's great. And it was such a big sigh of relief. So that was my mistake. That's how I kind of I think I was lucky. This was like early 2000s, maybe 99 or something. That I don't think anyone could get away with anything like that. Well, I say I got away with it. A week later, I'm sitting at my desk and the project manager who was there, he came and he taps me on my shoulder and like, when you're guilty of something and like anyone's just coming there, you're like, yes. I was like, yes. And he goes, oh, the head of retail banking has called us. Head of IT for retail banking has called us in. And that was it. That was the end of it, wasn't it? So I'm walking there and I'm like, someone's going to be packing my stuff into a box. And by the time I leave it, I'm just going to be escorted out the building. And I got there and there was the head of IT and he goes like, yeah, there was this incident. Yes, you're involved in it more ways than you probably realize. Well, here's a certificate that I want to present to you for your contributions to the incident. And you're a valued person and we're so glad to have you on the team.
This is where you bring it out live on stream now. We have to see the certificate framed, kept all these years.
I might have it somewhere. They say the insider threat is a myth.
So that's how I cocked up. That's how I made lemonade, I suppose, out of the lemon that I made myself as well. But it's also a good way to get some recognition in your organization. So, But I learned a lot from that. I think the big takeaway is like, now I tell everyone, don't make changes on production. Don't let kids run scripts on production. Make sure your logs work. Have them shipped off site. Make sure the admin that makes the changes can't flip the logs. And I'm an expert on this stuff now. So yeah. But other than that, that was my cock up.
It's a great story. I think the vast majority of people, the first time they discover how to script or automate anything, first thing they do is go, I'm just going to run this on my machine or on my first server or on my domain controller. And the vast majority of us all regret it.
Yep. You also quickly realize how inaccurate and out of date all documentation is. No matter how fresh the project, it's just a losing battle.
Fine, I'll just refer to this backup I took 12 months ago.
Yeah.
It's like the infamous nowhere gang. We've all probably done it. Update product X in the table to whatever price, free, and forget the where clause. So it updates everything. The infamous nowhere gang. I think there's an awful lot of members that have been through there and earned their stripes and realized that sinking moment when your heart just drops out the bottom of your feet and just go, shit.
Yep.
I mean, I've definitely scoped things to all members, not realizing that included all third-party members, and many emails have went out, and you've only found out when someone goes, hey, what's this email I just got? And you figured that you catch it alphabetically, so by about C, you've caught it. But, yeah, so scope. Yeah, thanks, Javed.
Yeah, brilliant. That was a great story, and thank you for sharing it.
No worries.
Okay, so we are going to move on to Mr. Gray. Rich, over to you.
So just to give a little bit of background, my name is Richard Gray. I'm head of information security at Freeagent. So Freeagent do an online accounting platform for about 100,000 customers, predominantly here in the UK, but also generally worldwide. What I'm about to show you is something that happened with us at Freeagent. It's not a confession per se. It is just some learnings that we had from some security incidents that we were targeted by in the relatively recent past and some of the lessons that we've learned from that. So I'm just going to share my screen just to help set the context. If I can find out, here we go. And of course, this is where everybody says, can you see my screen? And of course, hopefully everybody can. So yeah, rather than just being a confession, although I'm not perfect, I'm sure I've got skeletons in the closet somewhere, just wanted to show some security incident learnings that we've had at Freeagent. Here is a lovely message that I got in Slack. It was at 7:25 in the PM when I was probably having a beer, not something that I saw. And what this is a tool that we use called Screen, which is runtime application self-protection. So it's effectively a layer 7 security product that is embedded within our application and is somewhat context aware to incidents and traffic going across into our application. And this is something that we hadn't actually seen before. So within about 2 years of having the product running, it is indicating exactly what it says. A brute force attack has compromised user accounts. Now, I see that not at 7:30, but actually more at about 9:30 in the evening. And I suddenly thought, uh-oh, there goes the heart booming, dropping at the bottom of my feet. What on earth is going on? So I think the first learn that we have from here is how we hook up Screen into our PagerDuty process, where something like this would have paged me straight away actually when it occurred. But by clicking on this hyperlink within the Slack message, that takes us to the Screen dashboard for this particular event. And what this shows me in there in red is you should block accounts as soon as possible. So these are actually 9 accounts that were successfully breached due to a credential stuffing attack. Now at the bottom, you can see a nice little graph, and it starts off at sort of 7 o'clock in the evening. Well, it's obviously preceded that. It's all pretty flat. And then suddenly, sort of 7:20 in the evening, it's gone, oops, hang on. It's gone wild. and we can see the number of attempts that are floating through our system, sort of upwards of sort of 150, 200 every couple of minutes. And it wasn't, as you can see, until about 9:15 when that drops off, which is when I suddenly thought, we've got a problem. I need to get over this, on top of this. And that's where I came in and was able to use Screen here to actually go and block the offending IP. We can see for the first 8 accounts in here, the offending IP is 31.132.7.4. We did some analysis on these IP addresses a little bit later on. Thankfully, or not thankfully, the person who was credential stuffing knew what they were doing to an extent. They were running through NordVPN. So talking to NordVPN, there's no logs we can get to find out who this might have been connecting to us. Obviously, a credential stuffing attack is where they have a database of leaked credentials, and they are just applying them one by one against our application to see if any of those credentials match and somebody has reused the same credentials, so the attacker could get into the account and potentially cause further damage. What I can do in here, and I'll show you just in a second, is this is all related to a special playbook within Screen. And at 21:27, where the color sort of changes from orange to white, this is where I automatically blocked the IP. Now, we've got this great tool. It should be doing this automatically. But there's a number of playbooks that you define, and this is a custom heuristic that isn't quite in the same location where all the other playbooks are. So this is why I sort of missed it. And then suddenly the attacker realizes they're blocked, and then they start off and go looking at coming to attack us from a different IP, the 185.134.23.126 at the bottom. So again, you can see sort of 10, 15 minutes, up it goes again, dunk, 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 dunk. And then as we're sort of discussing incident response with my CTO, we're working out how best to address this. Going forwards, this is the actual playbook that Screen has. And as you can see there, the summary, it's running a custom heuristic. This blocked the IP permanently, wasn't in place out of the box. So we can see down at the bottom, incident triggered at 1925 corresponds to the Slack report. 2223, I updated the playbook to block IPs automatically. And along the graph, you can see, well, there's the absolute hump where the threshold has been breached. Now, this threshold that's down here was a lot higher because, of course, you've got to understand the nature of your application, how many people are logging in. It's quite legitimate to have people who are fat fingering their logins quite easily. And obviously, the more customers you have, the more that scales out. So initially, I think our threshold here was probably at about 200. And that's why it had never triggered initially. But then with subsequent attacks coming in from different IP addresses, before I had automatically blocked the IP address, we dropped that ceiling limit. So then the automatic blocking could happen subsequently a lot quicker. And interesting, so this is the sort of details of that, where we can specify how many logins happen within a certain amount of time. There's this custom heuristic that Screen knows about the context of the application, property success, so that's to do with the login. Is it true or is it false? In this case, it's a failure. Block the IP for 24 hours. And that's how we've changed that. So that's been changed slightly again from up here where it's blocked permanently. But then again, we updated the playbook to only block the IP for 24 hours because we do have legitimate users who also use NordVPN. And we had legitimate users who were also denied access because of this. One of the good things, though, obviously, is having made sure that we had all of this in place. Then the same attacker came back 4 days later, and here it is on the 29th of June. I think the previous one was the 26th of June or the 25th. And lo and behold, nothing, and then boof, there's the 24 limit that's been hit, and that's been automatically blocked by Screen. So this is really good. As far as I'm concerned now, the attacker realizes that we're onto them, we're preventing them, and my shed's nice and secure. They're going to go and look at somebody's shed next door that where the door's hanging off and hopefully not attack us anymore. So yeah, a couple of learnings in here. Obviously, we talk about, we have rate limiting in our account, in our system. We have controls also, not only screen, but within the code to prevent brute force. But of course, this is not a brute force on a single account. It's a low and slow attack of one user, one password, one account, another user, another account, etc., etc., etc. And luckily, it wasn't that sophisticated where they were using a different IP every time. But even so, Screen would have picked that up for us, because at that point in time, the IP didn't matter. So it would have kept blocking a whole load of IPs, which would have been a bit more cumbersome for us. So that's just one good example of credential stuffing. How it was surfaced to us, how we understood what was going on, and how we then looked into it. As I said, quite interesting, I went and looked at these IP addresses, sort of filed abuse reports, understood that they were NordVPN, and of course NordVPN come back and say, well, we can't really help you because we don't keep any logs. So there you go, as opposed to free VPNs who don't but do. I don't know if there's any chat on that, but then
yeah, we've got a question on that, Rich. If
yeah,
you
sure.
don't mind taking it. So from Magda, who you may or may not know. I confirm. Was it random, or do you think they did some research and knew what the application did or would give access to?
I suspect. Well, you can sign up for a free trial on our platform. So, looking back and trying to sort of understand what was going on, the first where we go back here, the first IP involvement here, 31.132.7.4, is I can click on that and see pretty much. I'm going to show you in a second. All of the logins that have logged in from that IP address when it was first seen. And we investigated when it was first seen. We looked at some other logging that we've got for our application in Humio and found the actual individual signing up for a free trial, understanding the mechanism of signing up for Freeagent, and then thinking, oh, that's grand. I'm now going to try and throw a whole load of credentials against it. So there had been that slight reconnaissance against us. So yeah, they'd signed up as a UK account from somewhere out in the Middle East, somewhere like that. I can't quite remember off the top of my head. There was lots of sort of dodgy pointers in the account name or the account address, etc., that was used to sign up. So yeah, but interesting enough, I think, saying that Freeagent it's not a soft target. Soft target is not the word, but when you get into Freeagent, there's not really a lot you can do. You can't leverage functionality within Freeagent to extract money. You can connect your bank account to get feeds that we automatically classify into ledger entries for debits and credits. But it's really just that personal information, and that perhaps being stolen and being used for identity theft or identity fraud at a later stage. So quite interestingly, as I say, people sign up for a free trial. We actually only today I had our support team asking me, "Ooh, there's this guy. He keeps signing up for a free trial. He keeps loading into the system a trial balance of like $1 million, and then phones up support saying, can I have a refund onto my debit card, please?" So totally not the way it works. You're creating your bank account. Oh, this is my bank. This is my business balance that I've got to work with. It's not a store of money. You can't say, oh, my business is worth £100,000. Can I withdraw that, please, Freeagent? That's not the way we work. So very, very unsophisticated scammer trying to go, hey, can you just send me a check or refund my debit card?
I like their confidence. I
yeah,
like that.
5 times was pretty good. So, anyway, is that it? And Harry, was there any other questions on that?
No, that was the only question. Or Sebastian did also point out that possibly you just didn't pay enough for VPN logs.
Yeah, possibly not. Possibly not. Okay, so here's another example that happened, obviously, back in November. One of the other playbooks that we have, sort of monitoring business events, is when there are multiple signups from a single IP address. So a little bit different to the one that I just showed you. This we had already covered. And what happens is the IP address, it signs up for a free trial multiple times within a short space of time. Here's the 5 times in 1 hour. And we go, no, sorry, not happening. And we block the user, we block the IP address. So then what we can do is we can go and sort of look at this IP address further. So but before we do that, here's another example of the playbook. So again, here's our threshold that we set. So this is us understanding our application, and we know users shouldn't really, they might set up one account, they might set up another account, but 3, 4, 5, anything more than that sounds probably a little bit dodgy. So what we have, five or more accounts set up within 60 minutes, block the IP for an hour. And again, that gets notified to us in Slack. So here's the IP down here, 74.208.84.153. Within screen, I can click on that, and it tells me it's coming from the United States. Not a problem for us. But quite interestingly, I can see, look, here's all the users that I've logged in. So this is where I refer back to the previous one and go, okay, Mr. Diff 8, Mr. Diff 4, Mr. Diff 3. Well, this all sounds just not quite right. So we can see here that they've logged in simultaneous places. We don't prevent simultaneous logins. There's some debate around whether we do that, but we've got some users who do use VPNs, and there's some legitimate business reasons for that. But I'm looking at all of these, Mr. Diff, Mr. Diff, Mr. Diff. So then I go off to our internal administration tool. Now, luckily, not like Twitter, this is not available to everybody where they can just log in and go rogue. But what it does allow me to do is it allows me to search on that email, or a portion of that email, obviously Mr. Diff, and I can see here's 5 users that have registered effectively. They've got live free trials, and this one was cancelled. Oh, that's, again, a little bit strange. Hunting the threat, let's dive a little bit deeper into this. And in there we can see, look, they have tried to sign up for our system at $10 a month, and they've tried multiple times. And each time, so what we do is we shell out to Stripe. Stripe manage all our credit card payments, and Stripe are just returning, no. Now, I don't have a screenshot here, but digging further into Stripe, you can see that every single one of these credit card failures was for a different credit card. So again, we're back to some sort of level of stuffing. Now, we were under the impression that Stripe had relevant rate limits in here. We believed that 20 failures like this should be causing Stripe to block. We should have an exponential back off. So there was a little bit of post-mortem after this to understand why we weren't doing things. But again, by having screen in place, I can guard against these business events and deal with them in real time without having to do a code change, code deploy, go through the whole release process. The end result of this, when we tallied it up, was actually 14,000 odd credit cards were stuffed until the user found one that worked. Then they canceled their account with Freeagent and off they went on a shopping spree. Didn't really affect us. So that goes back to the earlier question from Sebastian that, was there anything they were trying to do within Freeagent to leverage further functionality? So again, in this case, no, just trying to identify a credit card that they can use for some high value goods somewhere else. But then we thought, right, okay, how are we going to prevent this? Stripe were sort of less than helpful. Spoke to Stripe, said, well, what do you do with this credit card? Do you go and inform Visa and MasterCard and all? And they don't. They're only really interested in people using their platforms. So I was a little bit surprised at that. But what we then did is we effectively instrumented our code. So at the place where people are calling the Stripe, we log that out to screen, and we send this Stripe error value, and we add some properties in there, which includes the payment ID, if we need to look at that, the decline code, and a message. So what that allows me to do is it allows me within screen to record all of these properties that come back. So they could be do not honor, it could be fraudulent, lost card pickup, card stolen, etc. Now, credit card companies are notorious at not really giving you the right details, and they quite often just tell you do not honor. Now, that could be, I've maxed my credit limit, or quite legitimate reasons. So here we can see probably legitimate credit card calls where we've received a do not honor. I can't show you a fraudulent graph because we only maintain the logs for 30 or 60 days. I can't remember off the top of my head. So obviously this happened back in November or December, so I don't have that log to show you anymore. But what I do have is the testing of that and the screen output into Slack for us to say, here's a Stripe error code. It matches the fraud status, and then the user is blocked for 6 hours. So now we have a playbook in place that if it happens twice, debate whether it even happens once, we would go and block that user straight away. And then we can go and look in Stripe itself and see whether we want to refund the card and add any other details that we want to do in there. So that's just sort of 2 examples of where we've used what's known as runtime application protection. We use Screen to perform that for us, and it's the one tool that I've found that has actually given us peace of mind and surfacing things without having to encode it all ourselves. Again, going back to the earlier question of what's valuable within Freeagent. Obviously, as an accounting system for our customers, all of our customers spend a lot of time sending invoices to their clients. So email functionality is quite important for us. So it's another one of these valuable functions which we guard with Screen to make sure that the email functionality isn't being abused. Because we've had instances in the past where free trialists have signed up and they just go straight to the mail functionality, and they're not interested in the bit that says, hey, invoice whatever, although they could put in fraudulent banking details in there. They're more interested in just spam, and the spam email address and the content description within the invoice could be, please click on this, blah, 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 blah. We had a lot of issues coming from Eastern Bloc countries sending spam, and it's quite interesting what Google Translate tells you those spam messages could be. So again, confessions, shut down. That's probably about me. I think, that's me. So.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rich. It's always interesting to see, especially, real life production stories of, what happened, how you responded to it, and also what you learned and changed because of it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things we learn is probably need to do more threat modeling within our environment to understand what are the key bits of functionality that might be abused. Me as a security professional, it's well and good, but I might not understand the business logic and the business function fully. So it's good to be able to sit down with a diverse group of people to be able to understand how the application is used or how it can be abused by nefarious actors. So. Awesome.
Great keyword there, threat modeling. The ability to conceive what could go wrong and then try to prioritize your activities to mitigate what could go wrong. That's really the sweet spot. You can go out and purchase millions of pounds worth of tooling and use unstructured AI analytics to give you deep network heuristics against APT threat actors from outer space, but fundamentally, if no one's actually likely to attack your application in that way, it's all irrelevant.
Yeah, I mean, and Screen's been really good for us. I mean, we are a mature application. We have a lot of really, really good security features and functions in our code with regards rate limiting, exponential back off. A lot of metric alerts that sort of ping our ops team at the right point in time. A lot of those, the alerting where it is new is really only sort of detective. At least with Screen, it allows us to put in that preventive control as well. So not a Screen sales guy, but I'm a massive advocate.
Yeah, no one believes that. You're definitely a sales guy.
I've definitely been there. The black box options for those products where you're like, what is exactly has blocked them or what hasn't blocked them? And then it's very much unpicking it. So keeping control of things like that is... Yeah,
it's super visible, super easy. Yeah, there's a couple of things that need to do better, such as I say, getting those key alerts hooked up to PagerDuty, so I actually get a buzz when it happens rather than when I feel like checking Slack. Because we've got good working practices that we try to shut down at the right sort of time. But security always on, always open for business.
Indeed, and in this climate, and indeed the climate we've had for a couple of decades, you've got to be. Okay, so thank you so much, Rich. Thank you for sharing some of your confessions. We're going to move swiftly on, keep you all entertained, hopefully. We're going to move on to Sean. Sean, welcome. Thanks for joining us, and over to you.
Hey, thanks for having me. So I'm Sean. I originally started out as a developer, made many mistakes around developing, and moved on to uh, application security side of things about 7 years ago. So my confession is not with myself or the organization I was working with at the time, but rather a client, which I can't name for obvious reasons. So it all started off, I was working away one Thursday afternoon, a normal Thursday afternoon, and I got a phone call from my boss saying, "Hey, can you travel?" I'm okay, I guess so. Can you travel to Canada? Okay, cool. It's pretty urgent, so we might need you to leave like on short notice. Okay, great. It's Thursday, probably want me in the office for Monday morning. Fantastic. No problem with that. Yeah, it turned out that they wanted me in the office on the Friday. So I was 2 o'clock in the morning, going up to the bank, drawing up money, explaining it to the other half was really great. Hey, I'm going to Canada tomorrow for 2 weeks. Yeah, she was not pleased. So anyway, what happened was the client was a organization who got hit by a breach. And the client wanted some feet on the ground, so to speak, from security people around their online application and trying to figure out, firstly, what went wrong, how to fix it, and then verify that the fix was correct and try to find any other holes. Where the client probably first went wrong was they had an initial breach prior to this other breach, and they didn't do what they did the second time around, get people in, review, make things are correct. So that's probably step number one. Like whenever you have a breach, it's a good time to learn, reassess your security posture, your training, probably get people in, evaluate what you have in place. So your tooling, your testing, your training, all of that's really important. Because also once attackers attack you and see a soft target, they're probably going to come back and back. So anyway, they got breached again, and it was just mayhem. Rocked up there on the Saturday, and people were just running around, not knowing what they were going to do. We had people called in who actually spent the weekend and then flew back on the Monday after doing absolutely nothing because it was just panic. There was no sense of direction. And again, that's another good learning point is while you're in the middle of a breach, it's easy to panic. And I can totally get that. It's important that you prepare for it beforehand. So that's why things like playbooks and I forgot the exact term. It's on the tip of my tongue. Where you have scenarios that you play out and attempt, say you've got a breach. Now, who's going to be responsible for it? Who's going to do what? Who you're going to call? When you're going to call? What sort of message are you going to put out to your customers? All of that's really important. So when it does happen, which hopefully it won't, but unfortunately for many organizations, it will most probably happen, that you are well prepared, that you're not just running around freaking out and not really accomplishing much, throwing money like there's no tomorrow, because obviously if you've been a breach, you got to spend money and you might not want to spend the money or have the money to spend. So having those kind of tabletop exercises, that's what it was. So you got all that planning. Had they had done that, they probably wouldn't have flown out in such a short notice and spent more money on travel costs, for example. So have that in place, as well as you can give appropriate wording or message to your customers. We've seen time and time again where companies come out with different messages, and it's just, you look at it and you're like, oh, what are you thinking? That's where you get your technical people to be able to help give that message so it's technically sound, not just some made up stuff that just comes out really wrong. So anyway, it turns out that the vulnerability was in a twofold. The vulnerability itself was some logic flaw around the authentication. So again, pointing to not doing proper pen testing or having proper pen tests been done. They had pen tests done, quote unquote. It's always worth getting your security people to vet those pen tests. These were things that I would have definitely expected to have come out of a pen test. Like, one of my first questions was, why was this not found by your pen test? Pen tests are important. Feel free to challenge the pen test if you feel something's missing or they didn't detect something. You know it's there. Get your security folk and team to review the results. You're paying for a service. You should expect that service to be delivered. And then the ultimate cause was kind of associated with that authentication, but that on its own would have been bad, but it wouldn't have been as bad when you returned the entire JSON of all the details of the user on a page where you never ever needed that information. So
everybody gets the information. Free for everyone.
It had things like your credit rating, your relationship status, like all of the stuff. And there was absolutely no need for that information to be available on that page. So you combine that with the authentication leak and the hacker's going, happy days, I can get anyone's information. If you cut one of those things, the breach wouldn't have happened. So I've often, like, sometimes breaches can be simple as doing one thing, but often there can be different things chained together. And that's why sometimes breaching an organization is not always as simple as it sounds, but sometimes it is simple-ish when you have things like this in place. So just go through your app, and this is where not just pen testing, but an architectural security review will help. Am I doing the right things? Best security practices. Don't return the entire database because you might use it one day. If you don't need it, don't return it. And then the outcome of that afterwards was pretty good. Once things settled down and people, like, the panic went away, the team worked with us, the development team. They were very quick to fix any issues that we were found. They were open, transparent. They didn't try to hide anything. So those were the things that really went well. And overall, if they carried on with that kind of mindset in the beginning, they probably wouldn't have had that issue. And that's the last I heard of them. I haven't heard of them being mentioned in the news again, which is a good thing. So I hope they have sorted everything out. I guess we shall see. But yeah, that's pretty much my tale.
So still trading, and they're not printing anything to the console anymore, which is, there's the two main things.
Yep.
Yeah, the people that develop code, fundamentally, you're going to do things that make your life easier, especially during development, right? You're going to make sure that, you've got debug turned on, that you're writing as much information as humanly possible to your logs so that you can ensure that you build the best possible application, the best possible solution to your customer, complete your user story with your UX, 10 out of 10 across all categories. But with pressures from businesses and everything else, you try and get that into production, published, released, whatever, as soon as possible. And often, including myself, we forget to disable these flags. We forget to ensure that we set up guardrails that stop that kind of thing from happening.
And this is why you need tooling. Work with your security team. It should be a team, not just security folk doing their thing, developers doing their thing. It should be a team. honestly, tooling for me is a massive thing now. A lot of these things you can't do now with the pace that's going without tooling. So yeah. But having said that, you still need the manual pen test and that. No tooling will ever replace a human.
Was that a pitch for your current work, right? Is that the...
No. Just making it clear. Like, because I've seen people like, oh, you can have an automated pen test.
Sean's also available for all contracting opportunities. And
yeah.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much, Sean. Thank you for joining. So a late but very welcome addition to somebody who'd like to share a little bit about some of their own experiences in this area, with the theme being, confessions and lessons we've learned. We've got Kevin. Kevin, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Harry.
Would you like to share a little bit about what you've got to say about your confessions?
Yeah, I suppose I could. So for those of you who don't know me, I work in the NHS, and I have worked in the NHS my whole career. So a relatively long time ago, when I wasn't security focused, I worked in IT support. Back in the Windows 2000 days, when the team that I worked in, we all had domain admin rights, and in fact, everybody that worked in IT had domain admin rights. They had a one account. They used it for everything during the day. They accessed their email, they browsed the internet, all this kind of stuff. So I started to push to get us to move away from that, because there's obvious risks in it, and it was agreed we would go ahead with that. So went through this process of testing it, tested it on a couple of hundred machines, went fine, brilliant. Had all the group policies set up, ready to apply, change local group memberships and all this kind of stuff. So end of the day comes one day. I was always the late starter. I worked until late at night. Decided, right, I'm just going to go ahead and do this. And I've been through change control, been signed off. I did it. End of the day before I went home. Went fine. Came in the next morning late, and there was a lot of people running around panicking. But what's going on? And I was getting told about, there was clinics had to get cancelled, specialist equipment couldn't get used, patients in some clinics were experiencing significant delays in getting seen. Things had just stopped working in the morning, and I was about, give me a minute, we're going to have a look at this. So I scuttles away into a corner, looks at a couple of them, was like, yeah, this is my fault. Basically what had happened was the group policy that had been applied not only added in the new endpoint admins group, but it wiped out everything that was in the local administrators group as well. And if you've got any experience with the NHS, there's a lot of applications out there that just don't work unless the user has some form of local admin rights, or at least then it's got a lot better now. So that was fun. What I would like to say though is thankfully nobody was harmed. It was a very painful day. For me, lessons learned on the day, never ever make that change, even after you've tested on a couple of hundred machines. It was pushed out to about 7,500 PCs or something like that. So it was quite a painful day. It was all fixed by the end of the day. Most of them were fixed within a couple of hours. But yeah, for me, no matter how well you think you've tested something, you've probably missed something, and I did. Seriously, don't do stuff at the end of the day and tell anyone you're not tell anyone you're doing it. I hadn't told anybody, I just did it. Don't be overly confident. That was my issue. I was too cocky then. I probably still am a little bit too cocky.
Sounds quite similar. I've heard lots of these. I mean, I have pushed out a change and pulled everybody's MFA tokens from the device, and suddenly they can't MFA into the system, and you're going, oh, but it only affects one of the offices in America, and I made that change at 7 p.m. Yeah. Wait a minute, maybe it affects everybody. Hang on a minute. So we've all been there.
Just make sure you do all of your critical changes at 5 p.m. on a Friday.
Yeah.
No change Friday.
It took me quite a few years to learn that was a bad thing.
Yeah, you learn it very quickly when it's someone else's change and you're on call.
Yeah. So, needless to say, I did a lot of grovelling to our management team at the time. Thankfully, they were quite understanding. I was seen as one of the members of staff that pushed improvements, so that got me off. But yeah, I mean, the situation could have been a lot worse. So yeah, So that's mine. So that's definitely my worst. I've got a lot, but I'm not going through every single one of them.
It's bad for your career in the end.
Yes.
Okay, so of the speakers, just before we move on to our next impromptu speaker, quick fire round. So of the mistakes you've made or witnessed, what was the thing you did immediately after to relax and get over the mistake? Starting with Gary, who I know you've not shared a mistake, but I'm still interested to know.
Yeah, I mean, my mistakes are interesting ones, because it normally is something that I've tried to do the right thing, right? So you have that feeling of I'd done the right thing, but it went wrong. So yeah, I guess it's don't be too hard on myself. Maybe have a drink. Maybe.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, and Rich, what about yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot is down to the culture of your work environment. I know everybody talks about a no blame culture, but we really do have a no blame culture. We have, like Sean was talking about, we've got practiced incident response playbooks. We know what we should be doing and how. I think the fact that everybody comes together really, really quickly, nobody's pointing any fingers. They go, right, okay, we just need to get this sorted. Let's do it. And then the incident is stopped. It could be at 10:30 at night. It could be 2:00 in the morning. Go, fine. Well, that's okay, guys. We'll just deal with the write-up, the post-mortem and all that. That can all come back in tomorrow when we've all totally chilled. The sort of adrenaline is stopped, because you do get fired up. It's really, really good. You hear all these things, but until it actually happens to you, you're just like, oh yeah, it's all going to be fine. So yeah, you do get up. You're quite, you're ready to rock and roll. And then, yeah, it's just chill. Everybody, yeah, well done. We've all done a good job. Yeah, and then usually, though, these things are probably followed by sleep, because they never seem to happen during normal hours.
No, I mean, it's not like you've got a job to do after the incident the next day, is it?
Oh, of course not. Of course not.
Sean, what about you? What do you do to relax after you've made these big messes?
I don't relax until it's fixed. That's one thing that I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, but I hate something not working or something broken. I have to fix it. It has to be done. So once that's done, then I can relax. Yeah, I don't know if it's a good or bad thing.
You're more than welcome to look at my fence as well, Sean. It's not working. It's broken.
Do we ever relax? That's a different topic.
Yeah, it's often balance, right? It's not that one behavior or another in those kind of examples anyway are bad. It's the extremes of where the damage happens. Kevin, what about you? I don't know. Did I cover you already? Sorry, my screen rearranged. You're muted, Kevin.
Kevin, you're on the mute.
That's better. No, I suppose my incident started at the start of the day when I came in, so there was quite a few hours after it. I think by the time I went home, I'd calmed down slightly. I suppose one of the things I would say to anybody that makes a mistake, particularly a big one, if you can, admit it soon and admit it quickly, because I have seen incidents where someone's made a mistake and it's dragged out because the person that did it was too scared to admit they did it. And had they admitted they'd done it at the start, it would have been resolved hours before. And it's something, if you ever come for me for an interview, I will probe you on. And usually I tell this story when I ask it to put them at comfort and ease.
There's a lot of pride in there, isn't there?
Yeah. There is, and the thing as well is, I think you only make mistakes if you're pushing boundaries. If you're coasting along, you're not going to make mistakes. So,
yeah, I did often consider getting a T-shirt that just says "I am the smoking gun." Okay, so thank you for that very off-the-cuff question. So we have a completely unplanned two speakers now lined up. So we've got Jay first and David following. So Jay, what's your confession? And thank you for joining us.
Hey, thank you very much. Yes, I have a confession to make, but just a heads up, it's not really security related, but it is IT related. So I'm Jay, by the way. I work for TechForce, as you can see at the back. Right. I used to work as an IT manager but 10 years ago, I started out as a IT technician. So this company, we had about, when I joined the company, around 40 people. So the company by that time, it had grown from 4 people up to 40 over 20 years time, and they never, invested in IT properly. So you see the hubs and switches from 10 megs, 100 megs, 1 gig, and all sorts of manufacturers have all sorts of things, right? They don't even have a domain controller. Everybody has their own PC. Somebody says, "Hey, where are these files?" "Oh, it's on Jackie's desktop. Go to my network and find Jackie's PC." Double click on there and then get these files, right? It was a network like that, and they never had an IT person before in house. They had a contractor who used to come in every week, couple of hours. So they hired me, and it was my first job as well. Not much of an experience, right? And one issue that bothered everybody and me as well, right? Every time there is a break, lunch break, normal coffee breaks, the internet was dead slow. You couldn't literally do anything. And everybody in the company thought, we have a new IT guy, he will fix everything. Now we can watch YouTube and whatnot, right? Lo and behold, I was not that guy. But it challenged me, right? I wanted to solve this issue. But the network was so challenging. As I said, everybody has a hub underneath their desk. At some point, when the network was done, we had to disconnect every single hub and find out somebody, loop the network. At the time, 10 years ago, you didn't have, some of the switches didn't have STP protocols and all that to avoid the loops, right? It was that bad. Anyway, so we had a 50 meg, I think, I remember 54 megs or something like that, internet connection. And I decided to sort it out and find out what the issue really is. Is it really because everybody browsing the internet during the break, or somebody doing something? But long story short, I never managed to find out, right? So everybody chalked it up to, right, okay, maybe it's a break. Everybody is browsing internet. That's why it's slow. So 2 months later, this nice Indian guy, another fellow Indian guy, he's leaving the company. He's very, very nice guy, very smooth talking. I have lots of respect for him. So he was leaving the company. We had a night out and everything done. And next morning, they gave the PC to me to clean up and give it to the next person. You know what I found on the PC? 160 high definition movies. Over 120 gigs. So this guy, I asked him, so every time their break coming up, right, 12 o'clock, he used to jump on his PC at 11:30 and then start downloading a movie. So that was the whole problem. So what did I do, right? This is my confession. I copied all the movies onto my personal hard drive. So that was my Netflix sorted for a few months. Yeah, this was like in 2010, right? But one thing, what happened was when I joined the company, a month into the job, my manager said, "Hey, we are moving to a new building, and you have to set up everything, properly this time. You have to buy servers and all the bloody blah." So I started focusing on that, and 4 months later, we moved into new offices, and we had all the new gear. So one of the things we were looking at that point to avoid the same issue was, buy Cisco firewalls and content filtering licenses and all that. But when we looked into it, the costs were so high, company doesn't want to pay, right? And I said, "Hey, you know what? I'll build you a firewall." I got an old XP box and put the pfSense on it. Yeah, I'm sure some of you know pfSense, right? And got a couple of plugins, and I can see which IP address, which hosts are downloading, what data and all that. So we managed to link top downloaders for the week to intranet. So everybody who goes on the intranet, they can see their host name, who is downloading the most. So that's how we kept out of the problem. And also we got the lease line, which was like 20 megs at the time. Going from 54 megs normal, broadband connection to 20 megs dedicated was brilliant, right? So that's my story. I hope it made you laugh. Right.
Yeah, it's funny when you get into those kind of small businesses, not exclusively by any means, but especially small unmanaged IT environments, and you start digging around and going, oh, what's that over there? Oh, that is a 10-year-old installation of Kazaa. Okay, yeah. Great.
Everybody has local admin rights on their PCs. And when we moved the building and we had domain control set up, and I said, nobody is having local admin rights. And it's almost like I'm taking their house away. No, I'm having it. No, you're not.
I mean, not I had a good support from an organization with 2,000 developers. They get upset very quickly.
It's always the engineers and the developers who are most in the know and who get most upset by taking things away. It's very difficult to take things away from people, whether they use them or not. It's very hard.
And then they ask you why you're running Mimikatz, and it's like, well, so I can get local admin again, obviously.
Yeah, and slowly, after we moved one step after other, we started implementing new systems. At the time, we had like IMAP email. We got an Exchange server, and that was another big story. I could go on whole day. If you want to have a bad day at work, just screw up Exchange server. That's it. I spent like 18 hours a day from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, 4 days in a row to get it back up and running. Just no good.
That's a horror story at that point. More than a cyber confession, right? It's getting in the Halloween territory with that one.
Oh man, it's terrible. So right. Yeah.
Well, thanks, Jay, and asking the same question I asked the other speakers earlier on. And what did you do to relax from some of those experiences?
Always the best friend is beer, man. So whenever I have an issue, we have a feeling, right? How long it's going to take to fix, right? If it's going to take some time, I usually order a pizza, right? Have pizza while fixing the issue. That keeps me a bit relaxed. And then once the issue is fixed, I go home, have a couple of beers, go to bed, stop thinking about it, come back fresh next day.
Yes, it's the one benefit of the current situation, right? Is we don't need to leave, right? We're already here. Apart from Rich who's in the Himalayas, but I mean, the rest of us.
Sometimes we couldn't fix the issue, but at the same time, we need to, walk away from it and then come back. The fresh pair of eyes. Yeah. Sorry. Sorry to keep you waiting, David.
Awesome. Well, Jay, thank you. Thank you for sharing. Right, David, over to you. What's your confession?
Right. I have 3 quick ones for you. Right. 1 was me. 2, I found it. And 3, I had to deal with it. Right. So, number 1, if you were in the grass market, 1996 on Friday night and the Autoteller network went down and you couldn't get more money out, might have been me. Took out the entire Bank of Scotland Autoteller network I was doing my sandwich year, and so I was COBOL programming, learned that I didn't want to be a COBOL programmer, subsequently thinking, hey, maybe should have kept it, but when debugging code, I like to write little echo statements to say, hey, got here, and normally it's like, hey, Dave, got to line blah, or got into section blah. Do it all the time, always have. It's just that how to debug, and something nice and visual, away you go. Except then when you push the code to prod and you haven't taken out one of your echoes, then what happens is instead of coming out on the screen, they print it out on the line feed printer sitting in the mainframe office. And so when I came in on Monday morning, on my desk was a 3 feet ream of paper that said, hey, Dave, got to section blah. over and over and over again, pages and pages and pages of it. And my boss's boss was on call and had to go and back my change out because I'd missed removing just one. And it's a very obscure little line that it gets into. You have to have a very certain card with a very certain new set of numbers and stuff. Turns out that goes through way more often than you might think. And so if you leave that out and then the printer runs out of paper, it took out the autoteller network.
Not a lot of defensive programming going on.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure they learned some lessons about, letting interns and putting production code, and other people should have checked it and found it. As far as I'm concerned, that's what CAP's for.
Or putting more paper in the printer. I mean, we're potentially glossing over an issue.
Anything where if you run out of paper, an entire IT system goes down, surely that's not my fault.
You see, that's why they should bring back dot matrix printers. Just add a big one.
Yeah.
It's fine.
Right, so number 2. In a previous role, I was an IT managed service provider, third line support, did a lot of work on the security side. So number 2 is from that era. One of my customers decided, you know what? I dislike the number of domain admins you've got. Now, everybody had a unique domain admin, but given the fact that 30 people could be in it, you ended up proliferating hundreds of domain admins around the place. There just wasn't a better solution, but everybody had a named one. There was a really nice system for everybody changing the passwords. Nobody knew what it was. Absolutely fine. But if someone's going for Cyber Essentials and decides to kind of really take it super literally and say, you shouldn't have too many domain admins, and is looking for an excuse, as an MSP, you want to make sure that your password is strong and secure and not stupid. That's fine. It also shouldn't be rude words. So
that sounds fair.
It does. So there was an awful lot of passwords that I was deeply disappointed in when they pulled out the list of 30 accounts the guy had cracked in under a minute. And you're like, right, fine. But when we got to one that rhymes with Bagger 08, it wasn't good, and it was very, very difficult to talk to that customer when he's saying, I don't think that's appropriate as a password. And you're like, yes. Needless to say, the engineer in question had a new nickname for the rest of time. But yeah, so when other people might have admin access to the network that you are looking after, making sure that you have a good, strong, secure password that if somebody did crack it, you wouldn't be mortally embarrassed by, is a good top tip. So, number 3, far more InfoSec related. So, back in that previous role as an MSP, I got a phone call from a sales guy who said, this guy's not a customer, but I really like to make him a customer. Can you help him? He's having a bad day. I'm like, what's happening? Oh, he's had a ransomware attack. Fine, give me his details, give him a phone. So phone him up, and he's like, yeah, everything's been encrypted. Absolutely terrible. It's been down for a week and a half. And I'm sitting there going, you've been down for your entire network's been down for a week and a half. Okay, what the hell? What have you been doing for a week and a half? Because a week and a half with most size networks, you could probably bring it back, sort of thing, if you were really that way inclined. So it turned out that he'd done the right thing to a degree. He'd had an issue and he'd phoned up his normal supplier, but that supplier was an IT company pretending to know what they're doing with security. And so they'd kind of come in and went, oh yeah, it's this one. What we should do is definitely get straight into restoring all your servers, and we'll get everything back up and running, don't you worry. And so they did. They restored all these servers. What they hadn't done, and if anybody on this call presumably would have done, would say, hey, how did you get ransomware? So, turns out, RDP port open to the internet, not a great plan. Same admin password on all your servers, not brilliant. So these guys had come in and restored the entire network. 10 seconds later, it turns out that they all got owned again. And because the backup server was now on the network to do the restores, it took out the backup server as well. And you're like, it's okay. He has an offline backup to tape. The tapes themselves took 4 days to catalog before you could even start to kick off a restore. And so we were on site for like 2.5 weeks getting them back up and running, because some guy pretending to know what incident response was wandered in, didn't do any incident response, moved straight to recovery, and made the thing work. He paid this company thousands as well. They give him an invoice for like 10 grand, and he'd paid it. And then 10 minutes later, and the thing was, while I was on the phone, he was like, I'm like, right, how did you get it? How did you get it? He's like, I'm like, this. And he's like, tell me what it is. He's like, that's not email. And he's like, yeah, it came in on this server. I was like, well, how do you get to that server? And you can get to it from the internet, so that we can manage stuff. I'm like, oh. And then at that point, he's like, yeah. I figured they've come in via RDP. I was like, right, so you've locked it down? No. Right. While we're on the phone, going to just go and kill the link to RDP on that right now. And now let's talk about how we're going to unpick the mess you're in. But yeah, man in a van IT is one of my pet peeves. There are many good men in a van that can do IT. Most of them, though, are just literally running around trying to make as much money as they possibly can with for as little as money. And so if they say, hey, I can call myself a security consultant this week, people will believe them, especially if you say all the right words. But you don't know what you're doing, you can make it significantly worse and cost everybody a lot of pain.
Meanwhile, those RDP credentials have been sold and recycled multiple times.
So I hate just like
it's a party at that point on that server.
But yeah, so yeah, that was the third confession. Somebody else cocked it up, and I had to clean it up. But hey.
Oh, thanks, David. Yeah, it's super difficult, isn't it, when many of us have been, let's say, IT professionals before we became cybersecurity professionals. And of course, IT is an incredibly broad domain, as is cybersecurity. And, you don't want me setting up your domain controller unless it's Windows 2K, in which case I'd probably be okay, because that's what I learned to set up domains with, But if I were to position myself as a Windows domain controller expert, that would possibly lead to similar results. Yeah. But I am tempted to rent a van.
Hey, there's money to be made, apparently.
Indeed. And David, so what did you do? What did you do to relax and or celebrate once you managed to identify and fix these problems?
Well, so when you're in the middle of the first stage of incident response is, oh god, how bad? How did this happen? Oh no! And then you have to calm down, sit down, and get one step at a time. Make sure everybody's calm. Make sure everybody follows the process. Right? Okay. But afterwards, you're normal. Well, I haven't been unsuccessful. Let's face it. If we do incident response, normally we're kind of there and we've done it. So at the end, you do get the buzz of the job well done. Everybody's happy, generally. Maybe not with the bill, but everybody's happy and there. But yeah, at the end of the stressful day, ideally vodka, pool, good friends. Nowadays, emergency bottle of vodka.
The evolution of a cybersecurity professional going from Glenn's vodka through to something just a little bit more refined.
I just liked how it was a perfect arm's reach there. It was like there's no bending, so that's really good for your joints. And
so there is a bottle in the freezer just behind that door as well. This one's slightly special because a member of my own staff sent it to me because I was apparently a nice boss, and so I kind of kept the note and stuff, and it came as a complete surprise. So it's down there. And at some point, I'll take the team out and we'll drink it, sort of thing. But and then I'll keep the bottle, sort of thing. But yeah, so that one's always down there because it's not in the freezer. Because if it's in the freezer, it's for drinking.
Yeah, that's fair. It's fair. I think it's a vastly underutilized market. Is you've got beer fridges, we need vodka freezers. Small, compact, fits on your desk, maybe USB. That'd be ideal.
I'm not going to promote that on this call. I'm sorry for everyone that believes that you should have vodka on your desk at all points. If you're having stress in life, please reach out to any mental health professionals. Don't take Harry's advice on this one.
Other drinks are available.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well,
And non-alcoholic ones.
I can see the chat's feeling this as well. They're definitely with your advice on this. The perks of a home office, as Ashley says there.
Yeah. I think
More stories coming. Anyone else?
Yeah, so the last one is for me to share a story or two with you, and possibly Gary, if he feels compelled to, tell us something he's done wrong, which I can't believe because he's just got such an honest face. My career started in IT. Sorry, my name's Harry McLaren. I'm the product lead for detection response at Adama, and I'm a Cyber Scotland Connect moderator. My IT career started officially, i.e. my first contracted job in 2006 as an IT support / IT technician. And that's where my first confession is. So after a year of essentially removing malware and various other things from, normal home users' machines, the small computer shop I worked for started to buy and sell spare parts. So, we would fix laptop screens. So we'd buy a spare part and fit it. We would take an old laptop that was dead and strip it and sell it on eBay. And we already had some history of doing this, but when I was there, we had something like 50,000 feedback ratings on eBay of all positive, a perfect rating. And my manager, knowing that I was a articulate and smart young man, aged 18, 19 years old, asked me to start driving it forward. And I did my first packaging of a 13-inch laptop screen in a jiffy bag, and shipped this to a customer. Their customer was very upset. My manager handled it poorly, and we got our first negative review on eBay because the screen came literally folded in half because it didn't fit through the letterbox, and whoever posted it went. And turns out that £96.78 with postage screen wasn't very functional on the other end. So that's my first confession. What did I learn? Jiffy bags, turns out they're not everything. Sometimes you need a bit of cardboard in there. Maybe a little bit of more bubble wrap. So important lesson for all of you cybersecurity professionals. My second confession is when I was an intern, I worked as a second line desktop support engineer. So servicing an office of about 500 people for a global financial services company. I think they had something like 30,000 staff globally, really big, some really great IT. And as part of my responsibilities, I did everything from patching, network ports on switches on the back end in the server room, racking new servers, to desk moves and everything in between. Now, one week I had basically had too much work to do, and so I pushed back one desk move till the next day. I moved the equipment, but I didn't repatch the port. So I knew I was in early the next day. I knew this user didn't get in till 9. I was in at 8. So I went into the networking closet, which had been terribly maintained by my predecessors or whoever set it up. So, absolute spaghetti junction. You've all seen the pictures on Twitter of something similar. And I patch in what I believe to be their port from underneath their desk into the normal corporate switch, giving them access to all the things you'd expect, DNS, DHCP, and everything else. About 10 minutes later, I'm back at my desk, having completed my task, and start getting some help desk tickets through about people in my building not being at internet access. But it's not all, so it's not an outage. It's just a few people with a strange configuration. So we start troubleshooting, and after about 30 minutes, we see that some users are getting a Class C subnet IP address, a 192.168.1.11.2.3. Now we're a large corporate, we're not using them. We're using 10.0.1. whatever. So this is really weird. Now straight away we blame the user because of course we did, and we thought, what someone's done, and this had happened before, but not quite in the same way. Someone's brought in their own switch and plugged it in, and it's actually got a DHCP server built in or something like that. So we started tracing it and being like, oh, where is it, and blah blah blah. And what it turned out, after 2.5 hours and about 40 users impacted, 40 out of 500, so not that bad, is that I had accidentally patched in. So we had 2 dirty ADSL lines, i.e. non-corporate lines direct to the internet for testing purposes, so we could, validate certain things out of band and everything. I had accidentally patched in these standard Linksys access point / routers into the corporate switching network, and they were freely giving out DHCP addresses to any client that asked. And so that took a little bit of an ego hit, as I said to my senior manager, who was calling in from somewhere in Europe, because this was becoming a significant incident, as one of the impacted users was a high volume trader with 6 screens and doing important things, I'm sure. And I said, because I traced the DHCP server's MAC address and saw that it was a Linksys issued MAC, and went, oh dear. Give me a second. Trace back the patch. Somebody had mislabeled it. Probably might not have been me. Who knows? It was a long time ago. I've forgotten. But yeah, so bad situation. Lesson learned. Always trace your patching, and ideally, even if you encounter spaghetti junction, don't touch it until you understand what the cables do. And we'll say third confession, 3rd out of 4. More in my cybersecurity career now, but it was an IT incident that me and my colleague caused. We were on site with a customer to deploy a brand new, all singing, all dancing big data solution. We had set up the core infrastructure, set up the application, no problems. But this was a relatively small investment bank. They didn't have a huge amount of resources internally. They had a small IT team, and basically they wanted help configuring their logging. So configuring Windows domain controllers to log the relevant security events, right? So we could build up the nice, pretty detective dashboards and controls that they could consume. Now, we're incentivized because we're here to install this very expensive software and make it successful. So we go, well, look, not experts, but we've got some experience doing this. We'll have a look. Now, this was my 2nd engagement working with this software. So I was matched and essentially being shadowed by a senior consultant who'd actually flown over from somewhere in Asia. So I am generally trusting by nature, and he's taking the lead. Now, we are given direct domain admin credential access. So someone has logged into the domain, the parent domain controller, and they're going, right, configure the logging. It will cascade it down. It will, just see what's wrong, how it's configured wrong. And this colleague starts clicking around, and I'm nervous, but I'm like, I've seen domain controllers before, and this seems reasonable. And he obviously can't find the setting he's looking for. And he's at that point doing what I'm sure the vast majority of people listening to this have done. And you start winging it and going, well, maybe it's this. And what about over here? And I see him right click on the top of the domain forest and click disable. Now, what that does, and if I may get the technical components of this wrong, because I'm not, as I mentioned earlier, an AD expert, but it essentially revokes the certificate of your domain. And what that will do is cascade through all of your clients, and when they try and validate any credentials against it, they'll reject it because the certificate's been revoked. So the client cert they've got tries to validate and go, no, you're not the domain controller I thought you were. I don't know that's happening. I've seen him click a button and I'm like, okay, he's clicking things he probably shouldn't be. I wouldn't have clicked them, but whatever, fine. He can't find it. He goes to lunch. Now, when I say colleague, just seeing one of the comments in the chat, this was from another company, but I'll charitably describe them as a colleague because we were there fundamentally under the same contract and there to do the same thing, but it was a separate company. Now, side note, don't generally eat lunch, so I haven't gone out for lunch, and we've not managed to fix the problem. But the head of IT and the head of security, who sit next to each other, who I'm sitting in between, they start getting, essentially P1 alerts of key users unable to unlock their systems, all of Windows domain. And I can literally see systems locking around the office, like proper kind of blackout scenario. And I'm going, it's a coincidence. It's just a coincidence. It's, oh God, no, this is not the time. And I wait probably, I'll charitably say 5 minutes. It might have been slightly longer. And I'm letting them run around and do their triage, because like, you don't know that. You don't know it was that. It might not be that. I'm like, but I'm pretty sure he clicked disable. You don't, no, I don't think he did that. I mean, who would do that on a production system? Click disable for anything. And yeah, so the IT head of IT comes back, sits down, is like, oh, there's this problem. I'm like, oh, I've got something I need to tell you. So I don't know if this is related. I can only describe what I saw. As I mentioned earlier, this is not my area of expertise, but I do think that might be it. 30 seconds later, yep, he disabled essentially the entire domain forest. He clicked re-enable. He's like, that'll propagate. It will actually probably be fine because of the way we've got our implicit trust set up, and he didn't revoke it. He just disabled it and blah, blah, blah. It'll be fine. Don't worry. And he was a very, very nice head of IT, because I would probably be less nice to someone who did that in my domain. So, absolute hats off to him. I think I'd completely swept through my entire shirt by that point. Thank God for jackets. But, and the other consultant came back, and I quickly kind of mentioned the issue. And he was like, oh, well, not my fault. They shouldn't have given me access to their domain Active Directory controller. And I was like, don't think that's quite the answer they're looking for. And 60 minutes later, that consultant was seen off site, never to return to the UK again, for that particular company anyway. And I thought I was going to be seen off site, but I wasn't. And I just went up and I said, look, on behalf of, the company that we were both representing, even though we technically work for different companies, I can only apologize. That is not representative of how we normally do. It was a mistake. I'm really glad that you've resolved the issue. Didn't say we. God, that would have been bad. And ended up having a really, really positive engagement and was invited back. So lesson learned is that honesty is definitely the best policy for this kind of situations. We've all made mistakes, some larger than others, but if I'd waited and they had been hunting around, because why would you think suddenly your domain had been disabled? That's not a thought you'd have, when especially there's only 2 accounts in that business that had access to do it. Both of them were trying to fix the issue. They didn't do it. Oh, maybe maybe we shouldn't give access to 2 random consultants, one who's being shadowed. Hi. Interestingly, my final confession is going back to that particular customer. They had outsourced the development of a new app that was going to take care of some of their larger customers. And they'd outsourced it to a very, very large, very well-known software warehousing company, really big development firm. So I was there to basically make sure that all of the relevant logs from this application were going to be collected into their big data platform, so we could, write searches to detect bad things. Somewhat similar to what Rich mentioned earlier, rate limiting on, failed logins or failed certain components of the application. So I do what I know how to do at the time, and that is, find the data, collect it, index it, and make it queryable. That's my first job, is make sure I can process that data. And so I do it really quickly. It's machine data. You pull it in. Once you've done 10 of them, you've done them all. I start testing my queries, making sure I'm extracting all the fields, the line breaking, the timestamps. and I start to see a significant and unexpected amount of PII, personal identifiable information. Now, PII happens in logs, that's normal in some cases, but I was seeing sort codes. I was seeing account numbers. I was seeing PAN details, i.e. the credit card or debit card numbers, the kinds of things that are absolutely not what you want in your logs, especially not within a PCI DSS environment for which I was operating in. So I start to see this data flowing in, and the particular big data tool that I was using, essentially once data is ingested, it's not an easy way of removing it. If it's there unless you erase significant parts of the index. Now, we ended up being able to do that because I fortunately onboarded it into a test index because I was testing my configuration. So I raised with the same IT manager who was very, very kind to me previously. And I'm like, got a small thing. And he made the joke. He was like, it can't be the domain controller. You don't have access this time. I was like, no. I promise you it's not me. Is that meant to be there? And I show him an example, and he was like, where's that? And I was like, that is in your production big data platform, because they only had a production big data platform. There was no route to live or dev test. It was like, oh, it was like, excuse me 1 second. Went to go and talk to, I think it was their, it would have been their CISO, their Chief Information Security Officer. 50 minutes later, I see the team of 3 developers that have been brought on site to make sure I can bring the logs in correctly and the application's configured to log correctly into a room, and that's where they stay till the end of the day. I'm obviously asked to purge the relevant data and so on, and some very strong questions around, yes, how exactly did we end up with a notable PCI DSS compliance breach through what should be essentially test work and dev work? So my confession is that I should probably have checked through the logs by hand before onboarding them, but I think the lesson learned is, again, to some of the other lessons we've had on the call is, developers will do what they need to do to make their job easy. We all do that. We all try and make our jobs as easy as possible. Sometimes that means shortcuts are taken, especially towards the point where code is hitting production or live data. There has to be guardrails, there has to be gates. You have to engage with people with the requisite competence and awareness that understand how to check that those things never hit production. And so that I, as a relatively junior consultant, never had to explain to somebody why I've just ingested over 100,000 credit card details into your system. So yeah, they're my confessions. And to answer my own question, how do I relax? I'm somewhat similar to Sean in that I find switching off from those kind of problems really hard until they're solved. But I'm very fortunate to have a very supportive partner and a love of craft beer, which a combination of the two, probably 20/80, help me unwind at the end of the day and get ready for the next time.
Which order is that 20/80 in?
Well, I can't guarantee that she can't hear me right now, so let's just say it's ambiguous.
Or that Brewdog aren't on the stream and will revoke his license.
So, who?
No, thanks, Harry. That's crazy in so many ways.
No worries. So, any of our speakers, those that have the ability to speak at least, anyone got another confession they'd like to share?
It's all quiet.
Okay. Well, we are definitely approaching time anyway, so I just want to thank you all. Thank you to the speakers that put your name forwards in the beginning. It's great to have you on. To those that have joined completely unplanned, of which are half of the speakers, which I think is a brilliant thing in itself. Massive thanks. Essentially you've doubled the length of the show, and and given us some really interesting stories as well. So yeah, massive thanks to you. And finally, thank you to everyone that's listening. This is our first stream, our first live event that we have hosted ourselves without bringing in the professionals, so to speak. And Gary's done a phenomenal job at facilitating that and setting it all up. So thank you, Gary. We will hopefully be back. If you've enjoyed this, please let us know. We try and do things that we think you will find interesting. This is all now being hosted on our own YouTube channel as well, so we've got a bit more control. And if you'd like to speak, if you have an idea for an event, it can be a demo, it can be a capture the flag, it can be you literally chatting like we have about things and experiences you've done. Do reach out to us. We really want to include as many people who would like to get their voices out there as possible. If you're not already, sign up to our Slack. There's occasionally some interesting chats that happen more frequently if you join in. And that's us. So thank you everyone again, and we'll see you next time.
And there you go. We've answered the question. Do people show up without free pizza and free beer? The answer is yes.
Occasionally, although I'm not sure if I'd be here without the beer.
We look forward to the return to the offices one day, but we'll get there.
We do. But in the meantime, everyone stay safe.
Take care, everybody.
Thanks,
guys.
All right. Thanks, Harry. All right.
Thanks, all.
Have a nice one.
Next time.